World Pro Racing, where sim racing becomes real.
For only €5 a month, experience every high-definition moment on your TV, tablet, phone or PC. Great teams, great moments, and so much more. TSN from Melita is your ticket to stay in the game. Visit melita.com/sports.
Senna was a god. No one could even dream to follow him.
I'm from a very humble background.
The role of women at that time were really difficult.
This is so dangerous. You are risking not only your life, but also my life.
Wish your Wi-Fi network would just work in any room? Our new Stellar Wi-Fi is AI-assisted to give you the smoothest, fastest possible Wi-Fi throughout your home. Stellar Wi-Fi, assisted by AI, exclusive to Melita. Find out more in-store or online.
World Pro Racing, where sim racing becomes real. It's Wednesday again, and you know what time it is when it's Wednesday. It's Casual Wednesday, and Casual Wednesday is the best for a Wednesday because we put on a showcase, we put on a great race where the prize is just simply winning and just simply getting to the checkered flag and just simply doing the best that you possibly can. This is what Casual Wednesday is all about. It's all a bit of letting the hair down, having a bit of fun with everything, and treating sim racing sometimes like how it should be, some would say. Fun. The first rule of any game. Have fun. My name's Shakespeare. That over there is Nicholas Hillebrand here as we head into Formula 3 category vehicles in a place very, very familiar to one Mr. Hillebrand. It's Hockenheim, and Hockenheim is one track which I think goes down as one of the great German tracks.
Hello there. Yes, Hockenheim is definitely, well, I would say at least the second most popular German track. Second, of course, to the big Nürburgring, and there's just a whole lot of tradition with this circuit. Everyone, of course, knows the old circuit that goes through the forest. Started being in F1, I think, in 1977 to replace the Nürburgring Nordschleife as the German Grand Prix. And, of course, it's been there for quite some time now. And even in this newer form, it still does make for great racing. And every sort of race car that is possible to race there, except for maybe, prototypes like for endurance racing. Basically, everything can race on the Hockenheim Ring, and so far it's always been quite a spectacle.
And speaking of a spectacle and a place for great racing, you are watching live on World Pro Racing's YouTube, Facebook Live, and Twitch as well. On top of that, we are live on motorsport.tv, on TVM Sport, and with ESTV, the Esports Television Network. This is going to be really, really fun today because, as we have seen so many times before with Casual Wednesdays, Nicholas, it's a question of the Paul Heyman philosophy of booking for those who understand professional wrestling. It's a who's here race, so to speak. What we do is we go behind the door, we ask who's here, and then people turn up.
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes we do get quite a few even more famous drivers, or from more famous teams, I'd say. Last week we had Alan Terzic here from Journalese Esports Academy. He was going to be again here this week, but sadly last minute he was kept from driving again. But nevertheless, we still have quite a few talented drivers here. And I think especially in these Formula 3 cars, it's going to be quite a show today.
If you haven't already, ladies and gentlemen, you can like, you can share, you can subscribe to all of the most amazing action that happens with World Pro Racing. And on top of that, if you haven't already, you can head over to worldproracing.com. Sign up if you're a beginner. If you're someone who's been a veteran around the sim racing leagues, you can get yourself into some amazing action with World Pro Racing, FIA accredited stewards, and events that are propping up all the time around with what is going on. This is a place you do not want to be missing in terms of action, but hopefully in the next couple of minutes we'll be moving over to some practice and qualifying action live from the Hockenheim Ring, and just how brilliant this track is. Of course, it has changed since where it was as we go to pictures right now. Of course, this is the layout which was inspired by Hermann Tilke around 2002. Its first running was around this place, but a lot of people seem to not like this circuit. I am one of those rare ilk, Nicholas, that absolutely loves this iteration of the circuit. I think it does a very good job of putting a different slant of a challenge and turning a track which used to be a high speed, all about power track into a very, very technical one.
Yeah, it definitely changed the rhythm quite a bit. And of course, there's always like different preferred styles of circuits. And not going to lie, I'm also a very, very big fan of the older version, Through the Forest, simply because it's one of the first races I remember as a child watching Formula 1 back in 1999, 2000 and all that, and just hearing those screaming V10 engines flying down the straights. But nevertheless, this circuit has its own charm, in my opinion, because while it doesn't have this pure straight line speed bit, it still has a certain, it has a certain reminiscence of that. The Parabolica, for example, just leading to the hairpin, it is very, very reminiscent of the way up to the Ostkurve, basically just mirrored, so it is a left-hand corner instead of a right-hand corner. And of course, the more braking zones there are, the more overtaking spots there are. And besides the straight line speeds, slipstream battles on the longer layouts, there weren't too many braking opportunities on the old Hockenheim Ring, of course, and so in that sense, it's definitely an improvement.
And we've got ourselves 11 drivers here today looking to set some times. This is Luis Felipe Capamagian that we've got on screen right now. Fastest first sector of anybody here in practice at this stage. And you'll be seeing there on the left-hand side on the timing tower, 3 circles with letters that you've got there. And if you have seen any form of racing, that is to indicate the tyre compound that the drivers are running on at this stage. Likes of Garrido and Capamagian, well, they are on the soft compound tyre. Kirsten Abeja, who's just gone fast at the moment, on the medium compound tyre. But the likes of, say, Cavero and Gonzalez, they are on the hard compound tyre today. So tyre strategy may definitely come into play today in terms of who finds what time as Capamagian exits the final corner, makes that progress over towards the line and sets a 1:24.5 to go 3 seconds faster than anybody else.
Yeah, and we've seen Louis-Philippe do some good pace across pretty much all the boards so far. In the AMD triple event, he was sort of overshadowed by the very big players, of course, but nevertheless he had still very, very, very solid performances all throughout the time, and of course got a bit unlucky with some certain events that happened in those races. But yeah, I think at the moment he's looking to show some more of that pace, what could have been. Meanwhile, we see his teammate, Kirsten Abeja, going a little bit wide here through Mobile 1, so the entry to the Motordrome, as Germans know it, and now going through Sachs Curve, and then this little S13 and 14, which now leads to this double apex last hand corner, which is counted as 15 and 16, over the anti-cut on the outside, which you don't want to do necessarily, because the Südkurve is definitely something where you want to keep your momentum up.
And that was not the best final sector of them all either, trying to get some times. Here's Dean Vella, currently second position right now, and faster again in the first sector, looking to try and find a little bit more in terms of times. And there are drivers up and down the field that maybe we haven't seen so far today with World Pro Racing over the course of action right now. 7th and 8th position at the moment. You've got Hamadi Shamal Kirach here in 7th position at this moment in time. And just looking back to 8th place as well, that's going to be worth keeping an eye out on. Adam Plivash here, who is going to be trying to move on up through the order and find some good times. Of course, practice doesn't necessarily mean too much. I know that a lot of drivers don't like to show their hand very early when it comes to racing, and it's very easy just to go into a practice session and try and set some amazingly blistering times. But often, Nicholas, it's a case where we don't often get that opportunity to see that. We don't see drivers maybe pushing to the level that they can do. So I find it a little surprising that Capamagian has gone pretty much almost everything, I'd say, early, finding 2 seconds on the rest of the pack.
Yeah, as you said, it's all about the different strategies. Some people prefer to use this practice here as a sort of simulation for the race already, and others just try to do a bit of hot lap running for the actual qualifying. I think overall, this is pretty much the closest conditions that we can get to the, actual race server, since this is the actual race server. So it's never a bad idea to do some race practice. However, when you've had time to prepare for this event, you've done plenty of race running, of course, and so Capamagian's strategy is not necessarily wrong either. So just preparing for this, for the case of qualifying already.
And qualifying is going to be very, very crucial around this place. We do not know what's going to happen in terms of the race, and it's going to be very interesting to see. Here's someone who would absolutely love to have a good run here today, Giancarlo Vallada, who had a brilliant run last time out, were it not at Kyalami, for a few issues that pretty much caught everybody out, bar a handful. So at this stage, you'd feel that Giancarlo Vallada would love a really strong result here in the F3 around this Hockenheim circuit. But what are the pitfalls that the F3 really does offer? It's clear as well that they're running FIA F3 standards right now, say in comparison to British Formula 3 or dramas as they go on through. I think behind that was potentially Cavero there running into the back, so not ideal at all. That's Plivat's there in 7th position. But what are some of the pitfalls that an FIA F3 would do, say, in comparison to what maybe different vehicles would do around this place? What's the dangers around this circuit?
Like a lot of modern Formula cars, this car relies heavily on the downforce from the wings. So generally, I think DRS will be a strong factor for overtakes in this circuit. Of course, with the entire parabolica almost, as we saw this DRS board just to the side of the track there for a second. The parabolica pretty much up until the hairpin is huge DRS zone for everyone to just try make passes through. And of course, it's going to be Dive Bomb City when we actually have the pack all together here. But I think the big difficulty will be that in these mid-speed corners, high-speed corners, and of course turn 1, for example, as we see actually a bit of rain coming down here, so that's going to be quite an interesting factor as well. But yeah, these mid-speed, high-speed corners, they will be very, very difficult for some guys if they have a setup that relies on the wing downforce a little bit too much. Now as we're on the board again with Louis-Philippe Capamagian, we see these raindrops coming down on his mirrors, on this little windscreen just in front of his cockpit. And as he now brakes for Mercedes here, turn 8 and now through turn 9 and 10, this little section was built instead of that last back straight chicane that was on the old layout. And he goes faster once more, purple sector, very, very clean and very, very fast line through Mobile 1, turn 11 into the Motordrome once again. Now through Sachs Corner, and now through 13 and 14 once more. The track's getting wetter and wetter, but the super softs, or well, softs, are still seemingly the choice of tire to go right now. So, you see him going across the line, and it's another improvement, I think. Yeah, a little bit. Even though the last sector wasn't quite what he had hoped to be.
Well, any improvement is a good improvement there from Louis-Philippe Capamagian. Still being 1.7 seconds clear of anybody else is pretty impressive at this point. Kirsten Abeja right now in 5th position, who we see out there on screen at this point in time. On track, looking for a little bit of time, but it's clear that there is a very, very strong mid-pack here today. You can see the separation from 3rd down to 9th position. The difference is 1 second, or even less than that, 0.93 of a second at this moment. So that really does tell you exactly where the difference making is going to be, Nicholas, today, is that the mid-pack is going to be very volatile, very close together, and it's going to be worth having a battle. Sheldon Scott Muscat, though, has just found more time out there on the track and has brought the gap down in terms of practice times to 1 second.
Yeah, so once again, GT Omega RPM Esports is very strong, showing their pace here. Pretty much going 1-2-3 as I see it correctly here. Yes, because Dean Vella in 3rd place, he's also from GT Omega RPM Esports. So, yeah, once again, just like at Kyalami last week, they're trying to show their pace best as possible. Nathan Mussert, however, the winner of last week, he's joining us here in the broadcast team again. But, yeah, we're always glad to have him here as well.
Absolutely, and of course there are a whole boatload of people who get it done behind the scenes, and of course the racing action that we have today is going to be stewarded as per usual by the Chief Race Director, Adrian Fagallo, and Chief Steward, George Muscat. Here's Marta. Let's go for a lap around this place. Turn 1's incredibly quick here. That right-hander is almost very, very tough to get right, and the moment you go slightly wrong, it's trouble. Slightly missed apex there into 2, and actually is now going to pull it off the side of the road. Look, there's another car there. Let's try and go to there. Nope. Velada is going for a huge moment, and that is a reset back to pits there. That's the best way to avoid an accident when it comes to practicing. Anton Valle Gonzalez trying to make some progress here over towards the line, and stays in 11th, but improvements to the first and last sectors brings the time down to just 8.2 off of what is needed. Very tough sometimes to get things going, and with these casual races, it is worth pointing out as well, Nicholas, that we are going to see maybe a little wider of a range compared from some drivers at the front compared to some drivers towards the back.
Most definitely, because we have this very big gap sometimes from people who just start out, so who use these casual races to get into racing and sim racing in general, as we see Anton Gonzalez go for a bit of a late peek into the hairpin. But we also, of course, attract some people who have way more experience, like Louis-Philippe Capamagian, Sheldon Muscat, and of course, Mr. Garrido here as well, who's made it past Mr. Vella. So I think the 1-2-3 is now interrupted. So yes, it is.
It certainly is at the moment. So there is Sheldon Scott Muscat looking to try and prove to be a point of pace with 2 minutes to go here in practice. After that, we'll be heading over towards qualifying action and how important that is going to be. But this is also a place to try and prove yourself, as Sheldon Scott Muscat sets a fastest first sector out of anybody so far. Here's the run then towards the hairpin. This is the prime place to make moves on this circuit. On the brakes, into the right, as Vella does jump back up into third position. Huge correction on the curve, and there is that draining on that very large curve, which makes life incredibly tough to put some traction in. And whose vehicle is it? Well, it's clearly Mr. Beckman's right now, as you can see on the Halo device, but going a little wide there through that next left-hander, always tough. And again, it's a case of, I think, drivers are going to be really trying to push the limits here, but the middle sector, it's all about patience on the throttle. You've got to have, you're not going to be able to win these races by having a flat foot there with a stone on the accelerator pedal. You're going to have to feather it quite a bit through the middle sector.
Yeah, these cars really, as we see him just barely avoiding these anti-cuts there, it's really, really important in these cars to stay clean throughout the lap. And while Sheldon Scott Muscat is pretty much the fastest guy right now through the first sector, as we see him just very, very elegantly tackle the absolute maximum of the track limits that we have on that corner now. Through Sector 2 and Sector 3 seems to be a bit too aggressive still, so it's not just about where you can push the most, where you can be the fastest guy, but also where you can hold back, where you can have the control and the patience to go into the throttle, and especially coming out of that little Mercedes arena there, which of course is only the Mercedes corner and the corners coming out of that. There's still this difficulty that you can very easily run wide there, because these cars don't have all too much downforce compared to F1 cars, for example.
They certainly don't, but at this stage, practice drawing to a close with Capamagian then on top compared to many other contenders in terms of the racing that we have at this stage. Qualifying is going to be coming over next, and of course, with qualifying comes maybe a little bit of strategy that comes into play, especially when you're thinking about how do you tackle the race, how long do you go, what's the right call. Everyone's going to be wanting those soft compound tyres to be working to optimum temperature range here around this place, especially with how rFactor 2 is arguably the best simulator when it comes to tyres.
Yeah, the completely dynamic tire model of rFactor 2 definitely sets it apart from the rest. And of course, not just for dry tires, but also with this immense change from dry conditions to wet conditions. And I think that's always something very, very interesting to see. When it starts raining, how long some people can keep these wet tires, these dry tires alive in the rain. And then when the track is drying off, how long people can keep those wet tires alive. Because with these strategies, when you have a drying line, for example, of course, you're not going to drive on the drying line with your wet tires. You're going to drive through the puddles in an effort to calm down the temperatures again and to cool them a bit.
And of course, it's dry qualifying though at the moment, so they don't have to worry about rain or anything like that at this stage. They'll just be focused on, okay, this is a qualifying session. We go out there, we try and set the best times possible. Everyone out there then on the soft compound tyres, as they will look to try and make sure they have the best possible session right now, and making sure to get as much gap as possible at the front. Louis-Philippe Capamagian. Now, what's talked about is how important qualifying laps are going to be. What isn't talked about too much when it comes to sim racing is how important the outlap is.
Yeah, the outlier is really important because you have to get brakes on temperature, you have to get the tires accustomed to the track, because of course if you don't really, well, you don't want to push too much, but if you don't push at all, the tires will not get into a proper temperature range. So sometimes it can be really tricky to get that perfect tire range done. Louis-Philippe Capamagian, however, he has gotten that down quite well, as it seems, making his way through turn 2 now, and through turn 3 now, little flub of the tongue there, and as he heads into the first long DRS zone here.
It's a perfect first sector, 18.3. Can't really argue about that one then at the moment, but it has just been bested or even equaled on the brakes nicely through there at the hairpin, and making more progress now back towards the Mercedes section of the track. The big right, which leads now into the very tough and underestimated left-hand corner. It's 120 degrees of left that really does kink back over towards the right-hand side, and it's all about patience through that middle sector. 39.4 middle sector for Capamagian, making that progress now towards here, the Sachs curve, which of course has been very, very famous for a number of years, and this infield section, which effectively has remained unchanged since circuit start. There's the drag strip on the outside of the circuit, gets very slippery out there when things don't go the way that most racers want it. But a 26 flat over the line in terms of the final sector. It's a 23.7 as the benchmark and one in the wall.
Yeah, and that is the thing that can happen very easily in that new iteration of the Nordkurve. Oh, there we have the next one with a big way off. Not quite what people are hoping to do in this qualifying session, but that is sadly what can happen very quickly. If you go a bit too far on the inside, you can hit the anti-cut on the inside, and if you go too far on the outside, there's of course higher curbs there as well. And yes, there was definitely the car bottoming out on the rear because he hit the anti-cut, and yeah, at that point you basically transform from being the driver to being a passenger.
Well, Adam Plivash then will not be best pleased with the spin in the early stages of qualifying. Here is Hamadi Semal Kirac trying to make some good progress here and moving on towards the Mercedes section. Fastest first sector for him, an 18.727 right now. Moving into the next right, which leads once more to the arena section of the circuit. And on the brakes, at what point do you turn in? 40.8, not as good middle sector there, and missing the apex through the very, very critical turn number 11, Mobile 1. It's so important to get that corner right, because that is another one of those corners around this Hockenheim circuit where it's all about commitment in the mid-speed to high-speed corners.
Yeah, it definitely is. And unfortunately for those who get it wrong, people constantly criticize, of course, how, for example, the first corner, it has so much tarmac runoff, so we see quite a few series like DTM actually just completely run wide to an extensive degree. But some sections of this, for example, the outside of Mobile 1, stayed the same, so there's still gravel there, and if you go off there, you're going to lose a heck of a load of time. Meanwhile, Mr. Muscat here, he has gotten to, I think, a 24.3? Yeah, no, 24.4 now, just barely over the 0.4 mark. But, so quite close actually to Mr. Capamagian, and that will give him to think, certainly.
Well, that would definitely be something there. Sheldon Scott Muscat into second. Dean Vella is there in third. And then Giancarlo Velada, who is in fourth position right now. Two drivers yet to set times, and that is Joaquin Cavero, who has just jumped into fifth position right now in qualifying. And then there is Steve DeCellis, who is yet to set a time and retired, of course, last time we were seeing racing at Kyalami. So it's all about times. It's all about finding the right times, and just to make life a little bit more difficult here in terms of the racing that we've got going on, as Capamagian lets a driver through and Sheldon Scott Muscat resets the car back to pit, we've got Gonzala and Gonzalez.
Yeah, I think actually both of those are supposed to be Gonzalez, because we've got two Gonzalez on the entry list for GZ Racing Team. And those two are Francisco Valle Gonzalez and Anton Valle Gonzalez. So my guess would be that they're brothers and taking a bit of an excursion. Maybe they start into sim racing together.
Well, there's Kuznabeha with his own excursion there, and that's not going to be good. Here is Anton Valle Gonzalez making progress here through the left and trying to attack then the fantastic section from Sachs. 13, 14, 15, the south curve, the sud curve around this place, and going through. That's a little slide behind. That's not going to be very, very useful. But there is Anton Valle Gonzalez with a good final sector to move up ahead of Kuznabeha by all of 300ths.
Yeah, and these corners, because you can generally just take them so quickly. Of course, sometimes there's not that much that you can gain, but there's plenty to lose, because you can, of course, make quite critical errors in the middle of these corners, and even when you're coming out of these mid-speed corners, put power down the wrong way just a little bit, and you're instantly going around. So it's quite a challenge for this circuit here.
Absolutely. And this is where Kapmajian has been shining, has been pretty much untouchable so far. That's not going to help through the corner after a personal best first sector, sliding the rear tyres, trying to put the power down on early. It's so easy to do in these FIA Formula 3 vehicles as they go on now towards the middle sector of the lap, which will be the longest sector of all. It's a short lap here. It's only going to be a full 83 seconds, and there's a 39.5, slower in the middle sector compared to best. Looking for the braking marker, which is the 50-meter board for Kapamajian. Such a tough and underrated braking zone is that one in towards the Sachs curve, because it's not as if the track does too much, but it somehow is so deceptive.
Yeah, definitely. It is a little bit on camber, so you have a bit of a higher angle for the track on the outside. But nevertheless, it is still... It tempts you to brake far too late. And you only notice that when you're either completely off the racing line, or when you're going sideways into the corner, or when you're already in the gravel or in the wall.
Kapmajian then found an extra 10th, the fastest final sector, to move 1/10 clear. Sheldon Scott Muscat on an outlap right now, and in fact Garrido, who's just jumped up into 5th place as well, ahead of Joaquin Cavero there by 0.3 of a second. Plivas improves, but ultimately does not improve position. So it's going to be close right now here in this one. This is Giancarlo Vallada, 18.7 the opening sector, so he's a little down at this stage, and is also bringing someone else for the ride.
Yeah, and this slipstream in this section here especially, I think you really want all the slipstream you can get, because in this corner here, for example, it's already slow enough that the weight of the car plays more of a role than the downforce, but then you get into this very, very steady acceleration zone out of the region of the Mercedes curve through Mobile 1, and this is, there we can see it with the Red Bull livery car in the back. That is where the downforce starts playing a bigger role again and can be quite tricky to get right.
Giancarlo Vallada is down in the 2nd sector as well. This is going to have to be a lightning quick final sector to find improvement here. As here's the charge over towards the line. They're down to under 5 minutes now here in qualifying, and that time doesn't do enough. Martin Garrido, it is down in on the lane. Kirach has jumped up into 7th position ahead of Plivas. They're in 8th place now, so that's going to be work to be done. Joaquin Cavero, though, making progress through towards the Sud curve. Yellow's in the final sector. They've come out, track clear now. They can all improve and continue to find that time. But Cavero going on now to start a flying lap and looking for a little bit more out of this one. 0.3, back to Martin Garrido.
Actually didn't shift down as well. I've seen people try with 2 different tactics to approach the first corner, which was either brake for a moment, shift down, and then just put everything into acceleration, use the high rev range of these engines to just slingshot you out of the corner, or you try to just lift or just barely dab on the brakes and try to take it in what seems to be 6th gear. So overall, that is quite interesting, I think.
A good first sector then from Joaquin Cavero, looking to the middle sector now, trying to find those shades of improvement on the brakes into Mercedes here, and loses the back end, and there goes any chance of improvement on that lap. It's as easy as that, the things to start falling away and going awry in terms of laps around this Hockenheim circuit. It's so dainty and you need to be so precise. You can very easily see things going wrong in the blink of an eye. Talking of blink of an eye, Sheldon Scott Muscat, the gap's down to 3/10, and he's searching just for a bit more.
Yeah, and it's getting close once again in the closing stages. Dean Vella is not too far behind either, and just generally, I think, Capamagian, he might have been trying a bit for the quali runs already in the practice, because the others were quite a bit further away when they were still practicing. So I think they may have been practicing for the race, and that is Adam Plywatch just going a bit too hot, doing well to hold on for as long as he did, but in the end, sadly not quite able to keep it together until the end of the corner there.
Francisco Villa Gonzalez then trying to find some time out there on circuit, and not quite there at the moment. Going to dive down into the pits for one little look for one maybe more lap. There is Steve DeCellis, who's got a fastest middle sector for him at this stage, and will be looking to try and improve on a 29.7 and moves to a 28.7. So that's a whole second found, and ultimately now jumps out of the last position and splits the Gonzalez brothers up. 10th and 12th they are at this stage. 1 minute 55 on the clock, and you feel like it's first and second having a battle. Third, fourth and fifth will want their scrap, and then you got that brilliant little group, 6th all the way down to 9th place.
Yeah, and then we also have 10th to 12th place, so I think we will have small groups of battles just wherever we go, and I really think that this bigger group there, as you said, from 5th to 9th place, I think this will be really a section to have a look at, because on race pace they were quite close to each other as well.
They are looking pretty close, but of course the race could have a huge difference factor on it. Race pace, of course, is relative, and it's going to be very interesting to see who finds what. Giancarlo Vellada on an outlap then, searching for times and searching for the right strategy here for one final lap. Of course, they are allowed to finish the laps that they start out here in qualifying, and what's going to be key is who is going to be the last driver over the line who can potentially go out there and set some qualifying times. So this is going to be key with 40 seconds remaining on the clock now. Who is going to be best placed, Nicholas, to find that lap time?
Well, I would definitely have a look at Giancarlo Vellada, who's coming around the corner here. Just last bit there, maybe a bit too far inside, but as long as he can keep the momentum for the last corner in. Actually, he's going quite long, or is he just trying to... there we go. Now he's trying to get his swing out through the Südkurve. But yeah, I think he's in a very good position to do a last-ditch effort to get on the front row. And we've seen him just bring out very, very good pace just out of nowhere last week. So I definitely would keep him in mind right now.
On the brakes, right-hand corner then of turn 2, left of 3, left to continues of 4, and now it's an 18.9 opening sector. Got a little bit squirrely through turn 2, and there was the time just dropping away, not finding enough, and the longer that you spend out there on track, the tougher it gets for the tyres. Timer has expired then in qualifying. Everybody's going to be searching for who's got the best lap at this stage, and at the moment everyone behind's going to try and get things going. Yellow flags being waved then in sector 2. Somebody's gone for a bit of an oopsie daisy out there on the track, but for the moment Vellada looking to go through the middle sector. There is the offending driver at the moment. It's either going to be Joaquin Cavero, or it's going to be someone else. There's Gonzalez up into 10th, DeCellis still in 11th, and now the other Gonzalez is now back down into 12th place. They found a couple of tenths respectively out there on circuit. Vellada then making progress, looking for the final couple of corners, is down in the first two sectors and will be needing something out of the last to try and get something more. Pushes all the way out onto the AstroTurf, making progress to the line. It was an improvement in the final sector, but it's not enough to gain time. Garrido found time, but not position. They're making progress over the line. And look at that from Francisco via Gonzalez. Jumps up into 10th place then, right at the end of qualifying. Exactly what was wanted there in terms of that run. But Nicholas, that was all about setting a good time early and waiting to see if anybody got close enough. Cap Magian did the deed, and as such, has the pole position.
Yeah, Louis-Philippe definitely seems to get along very well with this track and this car combination. And you can just really always see it when he gets along with the car well and when he is struggling a little bit maybe. Because in the Triple Challenge as well, we saw him really just come to shine in Formula cars. And we've seen that as well in the FSR Winter Series, which is quite a bit ago by now. But nevertheless, he started doing his first couple races there, and he was instantly fighting for the front runner position. So it's really something, I think, really something of a talent of his, just getting along with these lower powered Formula cars. And Hockenheim, a circuit which is quite technical, where you have to really listen to the feedback of the car, I think that really agrees with him.
I certainly think so as well. And this is going to be a tough race, I think, for drivers today. They know what they have to do, and they know that it's going to be very difficult to get that opening corner correct on a pack start. And we've seen it so many times over the years. And in fact, we saw it back-to-back years with one legendary Michael Schumacher. That opening corner is so tough in a pack mentality. The moment one car makes a mistake, it's a chain reaction that could take 3, 4, maybe even a whole pack out.
Yeah, that is definitely one of the more difficult aspects of the first corner. You have a very wide start-finish straight, and when you actually have a look at the inside, it narrows down quite a bit just for the apex of the corner. So when you're trying to make a pass into there, especially when you're in a big pack, it can get very, very close, very, very packed, and very, very dangerous very, very quickly.
And speaking of who can find their danger mode out there on the track, how is this going to be run then in terms of a strategy here today? We're looking at this race thinking, okay, it could be this, it could be that, it could be something really good. We know that everyone's racing for fun, but at exactly the same time as everyone is racing for fun, there's still that ultimate goal of wanting to try and win a race, Nicholas.
Yeah, it's always about the bragging rights in these casual races. And of course, it's not prize money or anything fancy like that or amazing prizes by HyperX. But of course, it is still a race. No matter for what you race, no matter where you race, you always want to win. And these guys, they're all pure racers. Others want to get into it, of course. Like, for example, the Gonzalez brothers or whatever kind of family relation they have. They might be cousins or something as well. But, But yeah, these casual races are just really a really good chance for people to get into racing or to also just, wind down a bit from the bigger competitions, the GT Challenge series, the GT Pro series and GT Challenge series. There we are. Of rFactor 2 are starting soon. And, these casual races are a nice change down back into more relaxed and more fun-focused races.
And, well, everybody then looking to get themselves lined up on the starting grid. They know what they've got, 22 laps to play with here, and this race is going to be crucial. But what is also going to be crucial is that they're going to be dealing with a formation lap here today, and that was a little interesting looking at who was on what then as they set off. A lot of drivers then are looking at the hard compound tyre, it seems, hoping that that's going to be the one that gets them from start pretty much all the way to end. A couple of drivers thought about the soft compound tyre. So now we've got a mix of strategies, a mix of who feels capable driving on what. And what we have seen a lot of the time from Formula style driving is that those who can save their tyres do so very, very well in the race.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the tire wear in this circuit is definitely something to consider, because of course you have corners like hairpins and, well, the hairpin here, and the Mercedes corner where it's still quite low speed and not so reliant on stuff. So the biggest danger there would be the acceleration zone, I think, with missing traction on one tires. But on especially these mid-speed corners, so after we get through Mercedes here, we have this left swoop and then this longer right-hander accelerating. That will be quite difficult because there's not quite aero grip there yet, so it gets quite slippery overall. And with the guys that are running the soft tires, I'm really interested to see how well they will cope with this different wear, how well they will cope with how the grip will change and how also the temperature will change throughout the race.
The levels are going to be key, the temperature is going to be key. There are a million factors that a driver has to calculate on the fly, maybe some consciously, some subconsciously, in terms of how they run around. But there is your pole sitter, Luis Felipe Capamagian, who will take the place on the starting grid. It's a front row that is definitely going to be GT Omega RPM Esport worthy at this stage, as they all search for their box and try and line up the best that they possibly can, looking for their position and trying to stop in a way that is going to be helpful for them. That's not the best stop there for Correa, I believe that is, about 4 rows back, who had to readjust the line to get into position. You can see where Capamagian is. He's right on the line of the box. There's a lot of room given to second position then from Muscat, and they get themselves underway and going. Muscat bogs down. Look at Garrido with a good start. Was it a little too eager as they go through? One of the boards goes flying as they go into the opening section then for the first time. Capamagian gets a good run then, and that is a pretty nice start, a clean start then, as they go in towards 2, 3 and 4 then for the very first time. Plivac trying to dive down the inside. He's not quite got what's needed here. Around the outside looking here as the mid starts to battle. Plivac up to 7th, but Capamagian then gets the opening lap in favour as they push.
Yeah, definitely very close once again. We see that typical Hockenheim start nature. And people trying to make moves very, very early here, as we have all sorts of lines there into the hairpin. And I think that was Mr. Kirak there, who just went down the inside of Cavero in the very last minute. And a lot of different tire strategies here as well.
And it's those tyre strategies that are going to be key. Some on the soft, some on the medium, some on the hard compound of tyre. But it is Capamagian at the front. But the focus will be 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th at this stage, and how they are working to try and push on forward with their strategy. So, through the left, trying to get through. We had one driver join in right at the end of practice, actually onto the track. He's up now into 7th position at this stage in time. So really has worked out in the early goings, with 1 lap score complete as they funnel on through and look to get themselves the good run happening. And it's Vin there in 7th place, who is doing the best job possible right now with the soft. There goes the DRS marker board flying across the circuit, but ultimately early stages doing quite nicely at the moment, as there is Cavero, and that was his teammate Plivac trying to get through actually Vin for 7th place, who runs slightly wide through turn 3, has a big slide, and well, here comes the little look again to the outside, trying to find the move that's going to happen all the way through the parabolica towards the hairpin, and that is the position change, and it could be 2 for 1, because there as well is Kirak down the inside and picking that one up, but it's run too deep, and we're 3 wide on exit with contact.
Yeah, you could see Plivac using his DRS on the straight there. And it got quite close there coming out of the hairpin. Not usually a place where you want to be 3 wide. And especially when you then have to do the last bit of rotation while already being compromised on the inside. It's quite difficult to keep that car under control. So very good car control from Plivac to just have a little bit of oversteer there and no contact in the end.
Oversteer, no contact, and positions just about have changed. So Plivac stays in 8th position, Vin down to 9th, and there's the battle going on for 11th and 12th. Wide went Joaquin there in the background, Cavero, and trying to deal with a little bit of trouble going on through. That, of course, is one of the Valle Gonzalez brothers there, and you can tell who it is because that is not Francisco, who is in the Red Bull style livery, but more rather it is his brother there just behind. So Joaquin Cavero struggling a little in 11th position. Vela, though, has found a way through on Sheldon Scott Muscat. No surprises there. It was tyre versus tyre.
Yeah, and with the soft tires, you just have that decisively bit more grip compared to the medium tires. And you can really start to see the medium tire runners starting to fall back a little bit now, bit by bit. They're starting to fall back, but I'm really curious to see when the point will happen that the soft tire will be worse for pace, because of course that tire wears down a lot quicker than the mediums.
Plivac then trying to get through and gain a place as Dean Vela comfortably sat there in second position. Kirac, though, falls back behind. So Plivac has got the move done then and has gone up into that 7th place. And now Hamadi Kirac under pressure from Vin, who will want to go down the inside and pick up the place. And that's very well done there to gain that one up there. As wide in the background goes Cavero, who got through on both the Gonzalez's, then making that happen. Hamadi Kirac then dropping back to 9th place and struggling a little bit. You have to be also very careful being on the soft compounded tyre, that if you do run yourself into a few troubles, well, is everything going to run itself into more dramas if you, say, have a worse lifespan on the tyre compared to others? As there's Francisco Valle Gonzalez dealing with his brother, Valle Gonzalez, who will want to get through on the inside. And, well, no love lost between those two. They would have raced each other and known each other how to race. Bang! Tercelis outbroke himself.
Yeah, that was very unfortunate there. Tercelis still tried to evade, and I think, if I saw it correctly, he had a front wing missing. But I'm not quite sure there. But either way...
Again, this is where it all goes wrong, and you can see big misbraking zone, and that is where the front wing gets dislodged on contact. So just like that, that pretty much mitigates that battle in a very, very sudden and dramatic fashion.
Yeah, very unfortunate, of course. He still tried to evade at the end when he realized his error, but sadly for Mr. Valle Gonzalez, a little bit too late and prematurely ending the duel with his brother.
And DeSalis retires the car, and out of the race is Hamadi Shemal Chirac. Chirac there just runs into a little bit of wideness there going through the corner. That would not have been the easiest thing to have dealt with, but has just about done okay with things then for the time being as they cross the line on lap 5 now here of the 22 that we have available. We're already running through. Cliff van der Ven is having a pretty good run at the moment in 8th position and will want to try and gain those places as much as possible. Starting from the back is never easy, but there is a good advantage to that next battle, is that Plivac there has the hard compound tyre. There's your race leader. It's, of course, Luis Felipe Capmaggian, and crucially, they are behind 2nd and 3rd, looking mighty, mighty close between each other, as there is Plivac in 7th place, trying to have a good run. The gap between 2nd and 3rd is down now here, Nicholas, to 1/10 of a second almost.
Yes, so Muscat seems to be really getting along well on the medium tires, despite having a little bit less grip through that. And oh, that barely avoiding that anti-cut again. That anti-cut also sent, I think that was almost 9 years back now, sent Maximilian Günther, if I remember correctly, flying in Formula ADAC. So that's definitely not a curb or an anti-cut that you want to hit in a Formula car. So good reactions from Sheldon Scott Muscat there. But of course, it costs him time, and as he was right on the back of Dean Vela, he really does not have any time to lose right now.
It's a big deterrent at that point on track, so you do not want to be running over those anti-cut curbs. They will damage the floor, they'll damage the front wing, they'll damage the suspension, they'll pretty much damage anything it can get contact into, so to speak, when you go over those. And of course, when it comes to sim racing, you don't necessarily get that same feel as you would, say, if you ran over it in a real racing car. And of course, you're sat right on the floor of a Formula style vehicle like this, so it's very, very clear to say it. You feel it in your tushy a little bit.
Oh, I actually have a story about that. I remember Dennis Lind telling me about this once. Lamborghini Works driver by now, but also quite some time ago, I think 2010, 2011 or something, at Zolder, during a battle, he got pushed onto the back straight curb, so one of the bigger curbs there on the back straight chicane, and it actually broke his back. So, definitely not a fun experience. And you could just see after he just took off, it really didn't look that spectacular. But since he is one of the taller racing drivers, of course, he didn't have a seat inlet, so he was basically just sitting directly on the fuel tank to just be as low to the ground as possible. And it really didn't look spectacular at all, but instead of following the circuit, out of pain, of course, he just stopped in the gravel trap right behind that chicane. So you really do feel these impacts, and that was, I think, very, very good car control there from Mr. Plywatch, who is, of course, losing a lot of time through that, but that was one of these blasted anti-cuts.
And all of that battling that we didn't see on screen means that Cliff van der Ven is now into 6th position. Abejo's dropped down into 7th and now into 8th place is Plywatch, who will have to deal again with Hamidi Kirach out here, out on circuit. So that's not going to be ideal. There's yellow flags being waved in the final sector of the lap. I think that might just have to be for one of the Gonzalez brothers right now, who is running into troubles, and it's Anton Valle Gonzalez, who is without a front wing and without a rear wing as well. So final call, which happened a little bit before that, has just lisked over to the inside of the circuit after heavy, heavy contact.
Yeah, so very unfortunate. It's very easy to make a mistake out of the last corner because you have to try and get all of the momentum through those two apexes, and you just run a little bit too wide, and well, even the best of the best can make a mistake there, like hitting the pit wall or just flying off into the wall there. We saw Timo Glock do that in F1 actually, and a teammate of mine actually did that as well as a Formula ADAC test driver. He just ran a little bit wide between these two apexes, so touching the curb here a bit, and then he just went straight on reverse entry into that pit, tire wall at the outside.
It's very easy to do, and of course, if you flash back a year and a bit, of course, Pierre Gasly did that in free practice 3 in the Red Bull, and that was a very big point of contention in terms of his Red Bull seat, which, in my view, he should be looking to try and get back over the next year or so, or especially in the off-season potentially. But focus now on this race. Sheldon Scott Muscat there in 3rd position, Dean Vella in 2nd. The gap 4 seconds to your race leader, Luis Felipe Capamagian. But crucially, Muscat has not gone away from Vella on medium compound.
Yeah, and that is really the thing that is interesting right now, because I think Dean Vella might either be looking at some trouble or just not quite able to find a center at the moment, because you can see how he could take a little bit more road, and it does seem, well, not that dramatic, but it's lost momentum, and of course it's higher tire wear, because the more you compromise the exit of a corner, the more you lean on the tire and the more that will wear over time. So meanwhile, Sheldon Scott Muscat, that was very, very close to losing it. That is maybe a little bit a too wide exit, so not compromising the exit enough.
That's how much you need to push around this place, and it showed in that moment at that point in time. We have also noted that Plywatch has got through on Kirsten Abejo, who has dropped now down into the 8th position then in this race, and Sheldon Scott Muscat at the moment there in 3rd has dropped a little bit further back than in this field. Everybody's searching for a little bit of time. Abejo's got to be worried a little bit behind because of Kirach, because of Cavero, who are 9th and 10th position at the moment and want to try and get on through. Everybody else is starting to funnel out into these 4-second gaps here and there, making life just a little bit tougher to try and close in, and they'll need to use the rest of their races to try and get on through. One driver we haven't really talked about is who's in 4th position right now, and that's Giancarlo Vallada, who's had a very quiet race.
Yeah, it seems that everything just unfolded around him, and he just kept on driving, and decided to see how it would all play out. And arguably, that's sometimes one of the best strategies that you can do in these races, because, well, when you're constantly fighting, when you're constantly pushing on the edge in groups of people, as we saw it with Steve DeSalis, you can make a mistake quite easy, and making a mistake in a group of people, of course, is a lot more, well, stress building because of all the adrenaline that you do while avoiding other cars than by yourself.
Half distance then in this race will be scored as complete then. At the end of the next lap, we are on lap 10 now here of 22 as we look at Hamidi Semal Kirach at this stage, looking to try and chase down Kirsten Beher. The gap is down underneath a second, so that drag reduction system, that DRS, is going to be at full effect. What it does is it opens a little flap on the back wing, and that allows air to flow through the wings and effectively reduce downforce, create a little less drag, and means that you can go slightly faster. On the brakes then, into the corner, you can see here picture in picture at how that battle goes. Hamidi Semal Kirach, is doing a good job at chasing down Kirsten Beher, but Beher able to take the narrower line compared to Kirach, who will be taking that little wider line because he's being affected by the dirty air effect, which is so strong in these two corners.
Yeah, it definitely is something to always look out for, especially in these newer Formula cars that are still quite prominent with wings, but that is a Beher going through the gravel and barely keeping it together. We've seen him do that quite a few times now in qualifying and in practice as well. And we saw some white smoke as well. That comes from overdriving the tires. So just entering the corner a bit too quickly, a bit too much steering input, and the tires just squealing for mercy. And Beher is now basically taking that as an incentive to go for the pit lane and start his first pit stop.
And that will tell you all you need to know about how much Beher is using up those tyres in that race, because he's on the medium compound tyre and deciding to pit. If you're on the soft compound, like Kapamajan or Vella or Velada or Van der Veen or say someone else, then the soft tyre seems to be working. But Beher's really not liking the medium, so he's going on to the hard compound.
Well, definitely an interesting strategy, but I don't know if it is the right call in this situation, because they have pretty much just finished half of the race, and at this point, first of all, if they can go this long with soft tires, I'm wondering if people on the medium tires may just aim for a no-stopper, and if soft tires are maybe perhaps for a one-stopper, or if everyone can just finish the race on these tires and well, it's just a thing of preference once again, because of course with these Pirelli tires here that we have, you see that movement quite nicely when you have close-up shots, so they move quite a lot over the sidewall, which the sidewall of the tires, of course, you have the running area, which is just the normal vertical, well, just horizontal area that we see on a normal tire that every car runs on. But these tires from Pirelli are so soft, but on purpose, of course, that in cornering situations, they start to run on parts of the sidewall as well, which just gives you a bit more dynamic running area, so you have a little bit more grip in this corner.
Here's my question, though, and it's one that many a driver will be looking at and trying to dissect. Everybody knows how to drive quickly, Nicholas, but how do you drive quickly and protect the tyre?
Well, careful steering inputs, don't overturn the car, and sometimes maybe a bit of a slower corner entry instead of a big risk here, just like Mr. Kapamagian did here. And yeah, basically just try to keep it collected, try to never go for wheel spin. So it is very tricky to do, of course, when you're pushing on the limits, because of course you have to keep the car completely calm. The more weaving, the more oversteer, countersteer and all that you have in it, the more the car and the tires will really notice that, and the tires really will go down bit by bit by bit. And well, over time they will really suffer from it. And a lockup as well, whether it be on the front tire or the rear tire, flat spots, they will definitely completely ruin the tire on the long run.
And of course, it's all about keeping that tyre nice and neat. And we have seen over the course of the stint as Abeja's there in 11th and runs incredibly wide. Now, we've also just noted that Sheldon Scott Muscat has now started to drop back on the medium compound. And the issue now is, look who's chasing down. The gap down to 2 seconds for Giancarlo Villada, who's just been quietly going about business here. And Sheldon, who has been pushing incredibly hard over the course of this race so far, has been using up that tyre a lot more than Giancarlo Villada has, will now be looking at, okay, am I paying the price for trying to be aggressive behind Dean Vella, using up my tyre in the dirty air?
Yeah, I think that is also a thing that people had to find out with setup, because of course this is open setups, and you know, sometimes you really have to make these compromises when making a setup. Of course you want to be in your comfort zone and the car has to be fast, but sometimes you make these compromises. Do I want a bit more tire wear, or do I want to save the tires a bit more, and then as an exchange go a bit slower? And I think maybe Sheldon Scott Muscat attempted to do a setup that is more focused on pace and therefore has a little bit less, you know, tire preservation skills. But, well, as it seems right now, it definitely hasn't worked out in his favor.
Nope, doesn't look that way, but of course there's still time remaining in this race. This is Joaquin Cavero in 9th position, trying to chase down, of course, Kirach in 8th place right now. It's the hard compound against the soft, and the one thing Cavero's trying to rely on is making sure that the hard compound of tyre is able to get into an activation window to go out there and attack, where Kirach, for example, would have already gone through that initial phase and will be dealing now with the tyre starting to hit what is the quote-unquote cliff. So for Hamady there, it's going to be a case of trying to make sure that the tyre still has something to go and defend with when the hard tyre effectively hits the prime of its life.
I think one thing that is also quite important about the tyre choice here, especially with, you know, these high-speed corners and mid-speed corners where it really, where the temperature of the tyres really go up. The soft tires get hot a lot easier, of course, because there's more movement in the tire. So if you're constantly on higher temperature tires, pretty much anyone who has paid attention in chemistry, they can tell you if you have a solid object that can be you know, molten down a little bit. That's with steel. That's also with rubber. The hotter it gets, the more elastic it gets, and in the case of rubber, the more it wears out. And these tires, when they get hotter, they wear out a lot more. And the more they get worn, the easier they get hot. So the easier they get worn. So it's quite an exponential thing that can sometimes kick in. And I think that is one advantage that the hard tire runners really do have in the long-term running that could really play out for these midfield positions there with Plymouth, for example, and Cavero, who's trying to keep up with Kirach at the moment.
Of course, H stands for hops when it comes to racing. No, it doesn't. But at this stage, Dean Vella, 2nd position, 7.5 seconds now the gap to Luis Felipe Capamagian, and again, it's a case of gaps are being just fluctuated time and time again, up and down, all the way through the order. The mid-pack pretty much secure, but of course it's not over as well for 5th and 6th position either, because Cliff van der Ven has been really putting in work over the stint, and Martin Garrido here with 6 laps to go when they next cross the line, not this time but next time, has 2.7 seconds to defend.
And by the way that Cliff van der Ven has been catching, I think he might actually be able to come into striking range, because that gap is coming down and down and down. He's constantly pushing, and it's now going down to 2.4 seconds, 2.5, 2.4, or thereabouts at the moment. And of course, it will go down even faster once he's in DRS range.
And it's that range which is so crucial. You've got to be within 1 second of the car in front at the activation point, the activation line, to make things happen. Like maybe Joaquin Cavero is just fluctuating in and out of the gap. Now 1.1 in that fight, just behind them at this moment. But for Garrido, he's doing a pretty good job at just maintaining the gap. He's managed to extend it out to 3 seconds for a small while, but ultimately, the pace being picked up, that gap might not come down to what's needed over the course of this one. There is Giancarlo Villada, who is trying desperately to push Sheldon Scott Muscat to the limit, and ultimately, Sheldon's pushing to such a degree that he's closing back into Dean Vella again.
Yeah, I think sometimes what you really need is a bit of pressure from behind. I will not dignify that with an innuendo right now. But yeah, definitely when it gets hot on your behind, of course you want to start pushing away from that. And Sheldon Scott Muscat really is feeling the heat right now that Giancarlo Villada is putting on. And he's almost within DRS range already. And for the cornering, of course, he might still have an advantage because these soft tires seemingly are still going very, very strong.
They certainly are, and as well as that, into 1 second range against Hamadi Simal Kirach is one Mr. Joaquin Cavero, who will want to try and get as close as possible here, and it's defended into turn 2. Now that, I think, wasn't quite the best decision from Hamadi Simal Kirach there, because he knew that he had turn 2, he knew what was coming up, but now you've got this DRS marker board. This is going to make life incredibly tough to defend because he didn't give himself the most optimal line coming out of the corner, defends it again on the inside, but already breezing by before the braking zone is one Joaquin Cavero.
Yeah, and you could really see the overspeed he was getting from slipstream and DRS combined, so just really, really impressive how much more speed these cars can put onto the straight line as soon as a small element on the rear wing is collapsed.
And that's where the speed all comes into play. Watch out though for Villada. That gap is looking like it's just about knocking on the door of a second here, and this is where Muscat's got to be careful. Villada's had some fantastic laps, and I think that 27.3 on what is 18-lap-old soft tells you all you need to know about how quickly Giancarlo's running. There's the wing going open through the parabolica, and now towards the hairpin. All of a sudden, it's now a defense of the lock of the podium here. Villada thought about the inside slightly against Sheldon Scott Muscat, who's not going to buckle and break easily in terms of this battle. This one's going to come down to who wants it more.
And I would never even attempt to say that one wants that last podium place less than the other, because, of course, both of them are fighting up to their teeth at the moment, and, well, it's really quite interesting how Muscat has now adjusted his line seemingly a little bit more, so he does not hit that anti-cut again. And, but at the same time, you see Villada just really closing in again and again and again, just staying outside of that big dirty air range, but now being able to close in with those softer tires.
But every time he goes through a corner, it's a case of the back starting to step out a bit for Sheldon Scott Muscat. Remember, he's on a different compounder tyre and pushes wide through turn 1 again. He's got to be careful about doing that too much here in terms of this battle. Villada is in a range, but not a good enough one at this stage, because as you see right now, Villada in 4th place is trying everything to get close, everything to get right up there and dealing with the position, but is just not able to close that down the way that he would want to at this moment in time. Muscat is just defending enough with the 1.2 seconds now as what the gap is. This is going to have to take some pretty committed driving from Giancarlo Villada to get back into a range, because Sheldon Scott Muscat had said, okay, I feel the pressure from behind, let's just turn the wick up a little bit, let's just try and see if he can hang with this sort of pace.
I'd also argue maybe they're running a bit differently focused setups, because we could see that Villada, despite not being in DRS range, 1.2, 1.3 seconds, that is still normally around the range where slipstream starts to have a bit of an effect. So you should still close in, especially in a Formula car. But at a certain point, Muscat was starting to pull away from Velarde, despite Velarde being right behind him. So I think Scott Muscat might be running in a bit lower downforce configuration than Velarde.
That very much could be the case here as they push on. 3 laps to go here at the Hockenheim Ring for your F3 casual race here on what is ESTV, the Esports Television Network, on TVM Sports, on motorsport.tv, on YouTube, Facebook Live, and on Twitch. And on the brakes, there we see the number 3 car trying to make progress. Already, if you want to get into some racing action, you can head over to worldproracing.com for some amazing things that go on, not just on PC, but on PlayStation 4 as well. Some brilliant stuff on the horizon for everybody to try and get themselves involved with. There is your race leader, Luis Felipe Capamagian, to the tune of 8.4 seconds. It's a merry old song.
Yeah, and he's just another one of these guys, when he's in the zone, when he's just in his comfort zone and has a calm peace of mind, he doesn't put a foot wrong. Almost 9 seconds to Dean Vella right behind him, and right behind that, we already have Sheldon Scott Muscat and Giancarlo Velarde closing the gap now, so we might actually be treated to a 3-way fight for P2 instead of a 2-way fight for P3.
Oh, we certainly could, and that could be something worth keeping in mind. Here, Sheldon Scott Muscat has got that gap down to 2.4 seconds, but it might be just a little bit too far at this stage. Going through the opening corner, no mistakes driving, having to be forced at this moment in time. I think Dean Vella will be quite comfortable with being in that second position and having a little bit of a margin behind. Can't afford to lose too much, but we are at the critical point now of the race where every position matters. There's your race leader going on through, and I believe just behind that is the burst of lap down traffic potentially there. Kirsten Beher, I do believe that is now 1 lap down.
And I think he had also a small little freeze screen there, so perhaps he's also just not having the best time overall. And especially after his pit stop that he had to make, after his tires were worn out quite a bit. I think he was banking on that everyone else would also come in for a pit stop, but that didn't turn out to be the case. And yeah, once again taking his custom line through Mobile 1 there, taking the gravel a bit more than others would, which is, well, others don't take it at all normally.
I'm waiting for the moment rFactor 2 enables dynamic, I'd say, movement of the gravel, because there would soon be nothing left the way the line has been run by Kirsten Beher over this race. The last lap starts, though, for Luis Felipe Capamagian. Now look at the gaps then between Vella, Muscat and Velarde for second, third and fourth, because that is telling between them right now. Velarde's pushing, Muscat's pushing, and they are all trying to close up against each other at this stage. Look at the gap, though. Come down. It's now 1.3 seconds here for Dean Vella, and this might not be safe from now to the end. We might see a scrap down at the late stage of the race. Velarde is only 9/10 back of Muscat here at this stage as they charge on towards the hairpin for the final time. Nobody is going to be in a position to really make this move happen as they go deep on the brakes into the right. Velarde closing up down to half a second here as they make the run towards Mercedes, which will be turn 8 out here on circuit, going through the right. And now the next left comes up in the horizon. There is Capamagian entering the arena for the final time and looking at the Sachs curve. And then, of course, it's got 13, 14, 15 and the Sud curve to all deal with. This has been a lights to flag performance with a fastest lap in tow. You could call it a grand slam if you want to. Capamagian is a step ahead of everyone else, picks up a pretty decent victory here, a casual race win at this wonderful Hockenheim circuit. It will be Vella who will hold on to that second position then come the end of the race, and third will go to Sheldon Scott Muscat, and Giancarlo Velarde just couldn't do enough. Muscat was pushing just a little too hard.
Yeah, just barely outside of the range to get that last bit in. But we will have our last bunch of finishers now here, or our next bunch of finishers. And Cliff van der Ven, definitely impressive today. From 13 to P5. And I have absolutely no idea. We were so focused on the battle in front that van der Ven just completely under the radar, completely calm and no big show. Just drove in and said, well, thank you, I'll take this top 5 result, and it's now going to head home.
It's almost like he went to the Alexander Thebes School of Sim Racing, where you make moves when you don't see them on screen, and it's a very, very good talent to have sometimes, but of course, making places is always going to be crucial. So there is the results then that come through with all of those, and we can get you, hopefully, results then on screen in the not too distant future, but most crucially here, ladies and gentlemen, it's a huge win for Luis Felipe Capamagian. It's not all, though, that we have with World Pro Racing. We're not going dark. We're not going quiet here in terms of the way that we're running because, of course, Nicholas, round 3 goes to Interlagos of the HyperX Endurance Series, and that's in 6 days' time on Tuesday.
Yeah, I think it'll definitely be very interesting how people will handle with this very different circuit now, because well, Nürburgring, Monza, they all have very, very long straights, and, well, normally more than one of those. And Interlagos, while it does have this insanely long run from Junção to the first corner, and while it's a bit bent, it is essentially a very long straight, so a lot of space for slipstream battles. It is really dominated by that Sector 2 and Sector 3 run overall, with just how the entire bit, just this little completely twisty section is, and how people will deal with that.
And speaking of dealing with things, we have to deal with a couple of interviews here with World Pro Racing right now. First and foremost to the race winner, Luis Felipe Capamagian, who picked it up absolutely fantastically with a lights to flag victory. Luis, you were the fastest in practice, you were the fastest in qualifying, you were the fastest in the race, and you won the race. That is pretty much as easy as it gets.
Hi Jake. Not that easy as you tell, but yes, it was a funny race. The car is very enjoyable to drive, and we didn't have a lot of time to practice, all the team. So, but yes, we managed to get the car as fast as we can. The quali was almost tight with Sheldon. He sent it all the turns. But yes, it was a fun race, and I'm very pleased to win.
Were you expecting maybe some of the differences in terms of tyre compounds from some of your rivals behind, like Sheldon, for example, going onto the medium compound instead of the soft?
Yes. We were talking about that before the race. He made a mistake. After the quali, I told I will go with soft and conserve the tires all I can. That was I do, but didn't make some laps ultra push, and that's why the last few laps I guess he went down on the time. But yes, the tires, well, the softs are much faster, and if you manage the tires, you will get an advantage.
Well, it's a very, very good result here today in terms of a casual race. Any win is a good win. They say you're only as good as your last result, which, of course, is a big, buoyant push-up compared to the last result prior to this race. Now, what's the focus in terms of what's coming up? Is it just a case of looking out for the next event and trying to be up there near the pointy end?
No, we're looking forward to all the events World Pro Racing will do. Well, and the last race, the AMD that we are talking about, I have problem issues. All my screen freeze, so I couldn't make a good race. So I feel bad for it, but yes, now rFactor 2 is going to get the challenge race. So I hope the RPM team be on the top.
Well, it would be worth noting that it's worth keeping an ear out, because just soon after the racing that is going to be happening and soon after the interviews, we will be announcing where we will be heading next. But before we let you go here, Luis, shout out sponsors, anyone you'd like to thank for picking up a big race win today.
Yes, all my teams, the bosses of RPM, all the World Pro Racing that manage all these events, they are lovely, and you guys for the broadcast.
No worries at all. Luis Felipe Capamagian picking up the race win. Second position, though, would go to Dean Vella, stood by with Nicholas Tillerbrand.
Dean, very strong performance from you today. At first, in practice and qualifying, it didn't look like you would be able to challenge, but you brought it around and then held on to your second place to fight off your teammates. How does it feel?
Hello, yes, I mean, as quali pace wasn't really there. I mean, I don't think I had really put a decent lap together. I know I had more time to shave, but I just couldn't get one like a really good lap. Race pace was a bit different. I pushed a bit too much in the start, as you heard Lewis say, I think. I was trying to fend off Sheldon, who was on mediums but still looked very fast in the early stages. Then it was just I just nursed tires till the end. I tried to keep a consistent pace, and it kind of worked out. So yeah, I guess it worked out in the end.
Was there any discussion between you three just with, how you wanted to tackle this entire tire situation? Because you had different compounds. We saw people start on all three different compounds, but in the end, you basically just ran through the entire race on one tire. Was there really an incentive for you to try and gamble on the softs, or were you certain that they were going to hold?
Well, I wasn't entirely certain that they would hold till the end. I knew that half race distance they would be more or less destroyed, and you have to be quite injured on those tires. But Luis was more patient. His strategy was to be a bit slower in the beginning, nurse the tires in the beginning part of the race, and then go all out in the last few laps. I did the opposite, so I ended up having a bit more tough time throughout the race. But yeah, we had the same kind of incentive with the tires, but accidentally everyone had a different strategy at the end. Like Sheldon picked mediums by accident. I pushed a bit too much, so we all had different strategies at the end of the day.
Right, so any shoutouts you want to make after your great race here?
Definitely for the RPM team for supporting us throughout all these years, and the sponsors like GT Omega Racing, HyperX, Gaming Malta, Studio Motorsport, and of course World Pro Racing for the great races and broadcast.
Righto, then I'm going to give back to Jake, who is waiting with Sheldon Scott Muscat.
I certainly am, and well, Sheldon, it was a case maybe of qualifying was always going to be close, trying to whittle down times from practice, which looked pretty cut and dry, but in terms of trying to give it a good old go, it looked like you were trying to give it a good old go pretty much at every corner on every lap, and I think we counted about half a dozen times. It very nearly could have ended in disaster. How much were you really pushing the car?
Hi, good evening, guys. Yeah, I was pushing it a lot in qualifying. I think as you could see, I crashed like 5 times in turn 1. I lost it 5 times there, definitely. But then I started opening the RS around the circuit, all of it, even in the corners, and I gained a lot of time there by doing that, And I was short of 3/10 of Lewis, something like that, if I remember correctly.
Well, you were just short in terms of times, but let's talk the race then for a little bit, because you tried to attack for first, it didn't quite work, you dropped back from second position into third, and then the late stages of the race seemed to be very intriguing when you had Giancarlo Vallada behind you trying to give you a little bit of a hurry up. Was that a case of a message to try and push on a little bit and try and defend the 1, 2, 3?
Indeed, I started pushing at the last 10 minutes or so, because due to the tires, I had like 60% left on the fronts, because I went with the medium tires, so they would last even more than the softs. But I think I managed a pretty good race with regards to the medium tires. I did well, I think.
Well, a pretty good race, and of course we are getting word that we will be hearing in the next day or so about the next event that will be coming up in terms of the casual races. Is this something you want to try and kick on with, have more fun with these casual races and more of an opportunity to pick up some wins?
Of course, I would like to thank World Pro Racing for this event. These events that are doing the Casual Wednesdays, they are wonderful. They are very professional. You guys for the very professional broadcasting that you are doing. Yeah, that's it from my end. I mean, they are like amazing events. Everyone should join.
Well, if you haven't got yourself the opportunity to join already, that was the key. Sheldon Scott Muscat coming home with third position then in this one. And at this point, this is where the curtain closes in terms of our broadcast here today. But do not worry, do not fret. We still have more amazing action coming up on the horizon on Tuesday. We'll be jumping over to Interlagos for the third round of the HyperX Endurance Championship, the third round of 4. And of course, there will be another casual race coming up in 1 week's time. Where that's going to be, well, you'll find out very soon if you follow World Pro Racing on the socials, be that Twitter, be that Facebook, be that wherever it is that you get your social media action and you get your news. Make sure that you go and follow World Pro Racing, as well as going over to worldproracing.com, because if you miss it on all the socials, you'll find it on worldproracing.com. That is where you need to go and sign up for the casual races that will be coming up. And make sure that you get on that site regularly, because there will be at times a few prizes available. Not at this stage, but there will be in the not too distant future. Massive thanks though to the entire team who's helped to get this done. Of course, from the likes of Justin and Nathan Mifsud, who have been on the cameras, the stewarding team of Adrian Fagayo and George Muscat, who have been Chief Director and Chief Steward, Nicholas Hillebrand, Jake Sperry. Some brilliant racing action once again, but it is some brilliant work from the GT Omega RPM Esports crew. They have done exactly what they needed to do. 1, 2, and 3. They were pushed full that towards the end, but it's Capomaggian who had a comfortable race, but not in the way that he would have said so. This is going to be an interesting challenge, and of course, we'll see you very, very soon from everywhere that you've been watching, from YouTube, Facebook Live, from Twitch, from ES TV, from the likes of TVM Sport and Motorsport.tv as well. We hope that you have a very good day, and we hope to see you for some more sim racing action very soon.
World Pro Racing, where sim racing becomes real.
For only €5 a month, experience every high-definition moment on your TV, tablet, phone or PC. Great teams, great moments, and so much more. TSN from Melita is your ticket to stay in the game. Visit melita.com/sports.
Senna was a god. No one could even dream to follow him.
I'm from a very humble background.
The role of women at that time were really difficult.
This is so dangerous. You are risking not only your life, but also my life.
Wish your Wi-Fi network would just work in any room? Our new Stellar Wi-Fi is AI assisted to give you the smoothest, fastest possible Wi-Fi throughout your home. Stellar Wi-Fi, assisted by AI, exclusive to Melita. Find out more in-store or online.
World Pro Racing, where sim racing becomes real.